reports print out better, dashboards are better on the screen, and dashboards are a combination of reports. You can look at multiple data points at the same time. All right, on the Reports tab, there's a number of different categories. Down at the bottom, there's 3 major buckets. Common reports, if you notice when I click on common, it expands out the reports. There's a limited number of reports that are commonly used, and they already have a lot of customization applied to them. So they'll have fewer columns turned on. They'll already have some subtotals in there. So common is a great place to start if you're not sure what you're looking for. You don't want to get into a lot of detail, and you just want to say, show me, my invoice summary. Common report will show that summary with a lot of columns. Let me go ahead and show it. I'm going to double click on that. Let me execute it. And all my day ranges, I'm going to pick broader day ranges just because in my demo database, I don't have a ton of data. So you'll notice you already have this blue summary bar at the top, and there's about, 12 columns turned on here. So great place if you want to start, don't know a lot about customizing the reports, and just want to see what's already in here. The common reports are a good place to do that. The second thing to know about reports is at what level are you going to do your reports? Actually, sorry, let me finish. So that's the common. My reports are reports that you have saved. So once this starts off empty, once you have customized a report, I'll show you how to save that layout. Once you save the layout, it shows up under My Reports. So all of the reports you see here are ones that I've customized, and they are under the same folder that they were, that the report you started from. So if I did different invoice summary reports, they're all under my invoice summary. So just the way that the protractor categorizes them. And we've got a feature request in to just have all of my reports in a single folder. Don't have that yet. And then the bottom is all reports. So all reports is every report that comes with protractor. It's a long list, and they generally have every column available. So for example, in this invoice summary, you have the totals up at the top, and you had about 12 columns. If I run the invoice summary under my sales reports, under my all report category, and execute that same report, what you'll notice is there's no summary at the top yet. And if I scroll over, there's 50 columns available for this report. So good place to know whether to start, common, my reports, or all reports. The next thing is, if you look at the reports, what level are you wanting to report at? So invoice summary is one of the really good ones to start with. Every line in this report is a single invoice. So this is really good for shop level data. What were my total sales? All of your shop supplies and taxes and all of those charges and taxes are done at an invoice level, so they're in this report. So it shows up well in this report for invoice level. So what doesn't work at the invoice level? Well, if you're wanting to drill down to, like, let's say individual technicians information, you don't want to use an invoice level report, because what if you have 2 or even more technicians on one invoice? This report is only going to report one technician's name. So this is not a good report to look at by technician. This is not a good report if you want to look at the job level, like how many tires did I sell versus brakes. So invoice summary is an invoice level report, and then we want to get down to individual technicians or jobs. I'll use the service package line sales summary. So those are 2 good reports to start with. So I'm going to start with the invoice summary. And on these screens, once I've got the report I want, and I'm going to go ahead and close this one from the common reports, I can click this double arrow to minimize the navigation pane, which gives me a little more room. So now I've got this invoice summary report. Well, I've got a lot of detail, but it's more than I need. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go at the top here, and this section right here is where I'm going to do most of my stuff. So first I'm going to start off with the column chooser. So this chart shows a list of every column in this report. Now, I don't need a lot of these columns, so I'm going to start off by clicking none at the bottom. When I click none, it turns them all off. Well, created, scheduled, promised, invoiced, those are all times. I only care about what date was it invoiced. I can look at work order number, invoice number. In this case, I'm only going to do invoice number. Let's say I want to see the service advisor. I'm not going to pick technician for the reason I just mentioned. And I'm going to look at total. Protractor recently added this. I'm going to look at the deferred total, parts, labor, sublet. Now, I could display my discounts, but one thing that's good to know is those discounts are already in the total numbers. So if I do display them, it's good information, but you don't want to do the math again. You don't want to subtract them again from the total. These totals already include those discounts. And I may want to have my parts cost. I'm not going to do my labor costs and sublet costs for now because those costs are sometimes less exact because your labor cost in Protractor is a loaded cost. You may want to get your actual labor from a payroll report, but parts cost and parts GP is interesting. I'm going to look at my GP percentage, my labor hours billed, other charges. So with other charges and taxes, on this report, other charges, all other charges. So if I have shop supplies, tire disposal, anything that's another charge, this is a total of all the other charges, and this is a total of all the taxes. Now, OC 1 and 2 are other charges 1 and 2. Where if you look at the boxes above, my other charge 1 and other charge 2, I can break out 2 of my other charges. Now, if I have more than 2, I either need to run this report multiple times, or I could just pick the 2 that I most want to break out. Same with taxes. I can do tax 1 and 2, which would allow me to break out, let's say, my sales tax versus my tire tax. But for now, I'm just going to keep the total other charges and total taxes. Then we have a method of payment. And then a bunch of customer fields. So all these fields from file as down to source, these are all customer fields. I find the easiest thing is just to click on the file as. File as gives me the customer's like usually last name, comma, first name. And that's usually enough information for me to know what customer I'm talking about. So I don't bother with the rest. Again, you can if that's something you're wanting to look at. Then you have the vehicle information, and I will typically maybe do the year, make, model. So I at least have some information on the vehicle. So I'm looking at something, if I want to drill down into that invoice, I can see what vehicle that was for. And this field is actually really good, last modified by. This actually shows me who was logged in, who last modified that ticket. So these are invoices. This was usually last modified by the person who closed the invoice. So it does track what user was logged in that closed the invoice. All right, now when I'm done, the biggest mistake on the column chooser is you have a natural inclination to go to the bottom and click all or none. I don't want to do that because it's going to turn them all on or turn them all off. So instead, I go and just close the upper red X. So now I have a report with a more manageable number of fields. Any of these fields I can resize. I can move around the order just by clicking and dragging. So I can do a number of customizations in terms of the presentation. Okay, let's look up at the top. And this is where if I did do other charges, like I could pick shop supplies, I can make this my sales tax. I don't have those columns displayed, but if you are going to display those columns, you should select it from the drop-down. Okay, so now that we got the columns, well, what about the totals? Because I really don't want to have to add these up. I know I got the info, but I almost always want to see the totals for these reports. So for the totals, I go to the summary button. The summary button brings up the totals. Now this report already has a lot of those columns totaled. And I'll talk a little bit more about the sums versus the formulas later. But all I need to do is say, where do I want that total? So at the top is what columns are showing up. So if this is empty, you're not going to see any totals because you haven't told it what column. To add columns, you click the drop down in the middle, and all of the columns in the report are available here. So in this case, we already have majority of the reports totaled, so I don't have any more to add. But this right here is where it added up to the top. Then at the bottom, I tell it whether I want to display it at the top or bottom. And then the group by summary will come into play in a little bit. When I subtotal this report, it will show those totals also for the subgroupings. So I almost always pick grand summary on top with group by summary. I find it's easier to see the total up at the top, so I don't have to scroll down to the bottom. All right, let me pause for a second. See if I can go back into my team viewer. Are there any questions? All right, just one question on the webinar being recorded. Yes, we are recording this webinar, so it should be available after it's over. Okay, so now I've got the summary at the top of this report. Well, let's say there's a column that is not here, but I want it. Well, I can use these data points to calculate something. So let's pick a good one. So let's say effective labor rate. So if I want to add effective labor rate, I have the data points I need. I need the labor total and I need the labor hours billed. So with those two data points, I can do a calculated column. So I'm going to go up to the top, and now I'm going to use this calculated column button. This is, I'm going to create a new column that's going to be based on data that I'm getting from other columns in this report. So I click on calculated columns. And again, up at the top, this is what I've actually applied, so I don't have any calculated columns yet. When I set these up, the column name is kind of the internal table name, if you will. So I'll just say effective labor rate. Column header is what displays on the top of the column. So I usually make that one look a little nicer. Data type, and I'll show you, these are all in the Protractor help file, but essentially integer, I usually don't use integer. It's going to round off everything to the nearest dollar. So if you're looking for reports to match to the penny, you don't want to use integer. So I usually use decimal. Boolean is a fancy word for it's a yes or no. So if you do that, it's a checkbox, not a data column. And I can also do date time fields and string, which is a text field. So for most of my calculated columns, I use the system decimal. Now in the format, and again, I'll show you this in the help file, but there's a couple things to note here. The letter N is for number, C is for currency, so it adds a dollar sign, P is for percentage, and then 0, 1, or 2 are how many numbers to the right of the decimal point. So in this case, I'm going to use currency 2, which means it's going to show me this field as a dollar amount with 2 places to the right of the decimal point. Now I go into the formula. So in the formula, over here you have what are called operands. What are the columns? What are the data points I want to use? And then they also list a lot of the SQL functions that you can do. If you're really wanting to drill into a lot of detail, you can look at some of these different functions. You can Google how to use different SQL functions, and most of them are supported in here. For this column, it's a really easy one. So I basically want to look at labor total. So I'm going to double click on that, which puts the column over here in brackets. And then I'm going to divide that by, and I'm going to scroll down in this list. I'm looking for labor hours billed. So that's the formula for effective labor rate. I need my total labor charge divided by the number of billed labor hours. So when I click add, and again, if you click OK, this is not getting saved to the report. I have to click add, and I want to see it up here at the top. Now, if I need to change this, if I highlight a column up here and click remove, it puts it back down here. So I can add. I can easily move it back and forth. I could remove it. I could modify the formula, add it back. But if I remove it and say OK, it's gone. Okay, so now I have my effective labor rate. Now, whenever you add a column, it always puts it over to the far right. So my effective labor rate column's over here. I actually clicked once on it, it's sorted by it. I clicked again, it's sorted the other direction. I'm going to drag that down next to my labor hours billed. So what you'll see is now I have an effective labor rate per invoice, but I don't have the total. So now I want to go back to the summary that we used, and now I have a column that I want to add, and now it shows up in this list, effective labor rate. Now, for some things like parts and labor, a sum is easy, but I don't want to sum. I don't want to add up all my effective labor rates. And I'm trying to think mathematically, the average might work, but like I know averages don't work for percentages. So I could do an average, but let me show you how to use the formula. So if I use the formula and click add, I'm back to a very similar formula field, but now these are formulas based on the totals. So if I click on labor total, you'll notice this is now the sum of all the labor totals in this report divided by the sum of all the labor hours. I'm going to say okay, okay, and now you'll notice that effective labor rate now has a total at the top. So my effective labor rate for the shop for the last 90 days was $54.22. I definitely need to work on that. Now you may have noticed at the bottom of this column, there was a bunch of divide by zeros. So for the most part, you can ignore those. But let's say I don't want to ever see divide by zero. Let me go back to my calculated column. I want to remove this, and I'm now going to get a little more advanced. I'm going to add what's called an if statement. If anybody's done Excel formulas, they're probably familiar with this. But I'm going to say if, give myself a little room. So if I can't divide by zero. So if my labor hours billed, comma means if it's equal. So if labor hours is zero, labor hours equals zero, then I want this field to be zero, comma, the second comma means if it's not zero, then I want it to be that total. I add a parentheses on the end. Now when I do that, and I go, my effective labor rate went back over to the right-hand side. Now if I scroll down to the bottom of the effective labor rate column, now you just see zero, so you don't see the divide by zero. So it's not needed, but if you don't like seeing that divide by zero, you can put in the if statement. And hopefully it helps also give you an idea of how those calculated columns work. Okay, so we've taken a report, I guess, and let me do one more on here. And I'm going to do this one a little faster, but you're going to get an idea of what else can be done. Let's say I want my parts GP. So that's usually a good metric to look at. And it's not included in this report by default. My overall GP is, but not my parts GP. So I'm going to do a calculated column, parts GP percentage. I'm going to make this a decimal again. And this time I'm going to use P for percentage to 2 decimal points. Now what's the formula for parts GP? I know I'm going to need a parentheses to start with because I've done this one a bunch, but I'm going to do my part total sale minus my part cost, okay? Part sale minus part cost, that's my margin. So basically to do a GP, a gross profit percentage, I do my margin divided by my parts total, okay? So total minus cost is my margin. Margin divided by my total gives me my profit margin. So I'm going to add that one. Now that's over here to the right. Again, I don't have my summary. So I'm going to go down and get my summary. I'm going to do the formula. Again, you almost always have to do formulas with percentages because 100% and 0% doesn't always equal 50 if one was a $1,000 job and one was a $10 job. So add my formula. It's the exact same formula. Parts total minus parts cost divided by parts total. Okay, I'll drag that back next to labor hours. I'll drag my parts GP. So if you're doing this, you probably want to do all your columns first and then drag them into the right spot. So now I'm shrinking some of these columns so we can see them all at once or see more of them at once. So now for each invoice, I can see my parts GP, I can see my effective labor rate. Okay? Any questions on that so far? All right, and if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box. I will try to check the chat box frequently to
There are 3 members in this conference.
columns, but this is still kind of a lump sum report. This actually, as is, would be a very good weekly report. I'm going to run this report at the end of the week. I'm going to get my sales totals. I'm going to get my costs. I'm going to get my parts GP, my labor hours, my deferred total. So this is not a bad report to run at the end of the week. But let's say we want to subtotal this in a certain way. So one of the typical ways would be by service advisor. This is also a nice way. If you notice, source was one of the columns I could turn on. If you have fleet customers or employees, we recommend you create a marketing source for fleet or for employee. And if you do that, you can now run this report and subtotal by those or filter them out. So for now, let's just talk about subtotals for a second. If you notice, there's a blue bar right here above the chart. It says drag a column header here to group by that column. So in this case, I'm going to group by service advisor. Actually, right before I do that, one thing I want to do is click on things. So parts GP. So I did a parts GP percentage. Let me click on that, and it's going to sort it lowest on top. So it is a good way to say, hey, let's go look at these tickets and find out why do I have a low GP on these tickets. So you can't sort by any of these columns. Same thing with effective labor rate. I can sort by effective labor rate. And let me drill into the tickets that I have a low effective labor rate on. So you can also sort a lot of these columns. So let's subtotal by service advisor now. So if I drag this up to the blue column, you see the little arrows that show up? That means I'm doing it by service advisor. So now I have John and Stan, and I see their totals. So I can see overall, parts GP is 40% for John, 50% for Stan. I can see the effective labor rate. So now I can compare my service advisor's performance individually. I can also see the deferred work, who's deferring more work. So just by dragging the service advisor up, I can see that. I can still click this plus sign and expand out and see all of John's tickets. But at least now I can look at John and then look at Stan. And you could go multiple levels deep on this. So I could have like an invoice date. And now when I click on John, I actually see John's invoices by day. So a lot of levels you can do this. And normally I wouldn't subtotal, or I wouldn't subtotal by grouping too much on this invoice level report, but we'll get into some of that more later. All right, so now we've got a nice invoice level report. We got it subtotaled by service advisor. Well, the next thing we hear is, okay, I want to give a copy of this report to John, but I don't want him to see Stan's stuff. So if you ever want to remove or not display something in a report, you can use the filter button up here. So filter means I want to filter out certain things. You're not filtering in, you're filtering out. So in the filter, I want to say service advisor does not contain Stan. Okay, now this report is just John's tickets. Now, one thing that's good to note, if you actually look at this little data line here, it tells you I last executed this report. It has 22 rows, but 7 rows have been filtered out. And it tells you data is filtered by service advisor doesn't contain Stan. So if you're ever not seeing information that you expected to see, make sure you go to this data is filtered by and see if anything's being filtered out of that report that you didn't expect. All right. I think that's about it for now for the invoice summary report. Let me show you how to save it. So when you customize a report for the way you want to, you go to the layout button up at the top. I click on that, and if I had already saved it, it would let me save layout as. I can't deploy the layout yet because I haven't saved it as a custom layout. So the first thing I do is I say save layout. Now, when I do this, I do two things. One, I usually cut and paste the name in the end of the description. That way, if I change the name and I use this report in a dashboard or somewhere else, I can always see what report I started with. Now, this report just says invoice summary, but I want to say what this is really looking at. So I may say, at my shop, I call this the sales summary, and it's last 90 days, and it's for John, right? So if I'm filtering stuff out or I'm saving the date range, I'm going to put like that date range or filter in the title. So I know that this is John's report for the last 90 days. Now the save parameter values box here, if you look at, these are the input parameters. So these 9 boxes are the parameters. When I run this report again, if I want to save these settings, like save that this is my state sales tax, save the shop supplies, save the last 90 days. If I want to save those settings, I click on Save Parameter Values. That allows me to, when I bring this report up again, it's automatically going to have the last 90 days, and it's going to automatically have my other charges and sales tax. The filter is not a parameter for the purposes of this, so this isn't going to affect the filter at all, but this will affect the 9 parameter boxes. Now, let me show you one thing. So when I save this report, under invoice summary, here's sales summary last 90 days, John. Notice that the report I have open still says invoice summary on the tab. So if I go to do the layout, it doesn't give me save layout as, because I'm still, even though I just saved it, I still have the generic invoice summary open. So if I want to deploy this or create another one instead of John's name, Stan's name, I want to go over here and double click on the sales summary. And this window, just so you understand, if I say yes here, I'm going to open a new form. I'm going to open a new tab for the report. If I say no, it's going to close the report I have open and open this new report in the same window. So I normally say yes, and it opens in a new window. So now I have my sales summary last 90 days, John. Now when I go to layout, I can save it as, which will let me save this with an additional name, like I change the filter to John, and I can deploy the layout. So if I deploy this layout, it allows me to select what user I want to see this report. So this was John's report. I actually don't have John as the user. Let's assume it was Stan's report. I could click on Stan, and I'm going to give the owner and GM this report as well. When I say OK, it asks me to put in a 4-digit code to make sure I want to deploy this report. That report will now show up under my reports for that user. So very easy way, once you create the report, make sure you deploy it, and those people can now run this report themselves and see the data. Now, if you'll notice when I open this up, there's no data in it. I just need to hit execute again, and it will run that report with the exact same data. All right, so that's the invoice summary, and that is one of the major reports that I work with. The other one I work with a lot is, actually, before I leave that, if you look at, these are some of the ones that I've done. I can do an invoice summary, use it for a customer callback, so I can basically just look at my customer info for the last week or the last week that spent more than $100. I can do an invoice summary by make of vehicle. If I want to look at some statistics in terms of how many Fords do I work on versus Hondas. I have an invoice summary where I want to calculate my average RO, but for non-zero tickets. So a lot of people sometimes don't want to include non-zero tickets. Very easy for me to filter out invoices with a total sales of 0. So a lot of things you can do with the invoice summary. The other report I use a lot is start with the all reports. I go into sales. I do the service package line sales summary. The thing that's nice about this one is it gives a job level view. So I'm going to go ahead and run that one. Run it for the last 90 days. And now I don't just have one line per invoice. If you look at these first two lines, this is the same invoice. But if I scroll over, this was the oil change and this was the air filter. So you have one line per job. And the nice thing about this report is now I can get down to a technician level subtotal. I can also do things like subtotal by service category. So I'm going to see if I thought I had one of those saved. Let's look at the labor detail report. So this is an example of what you can do with that report. Like a subtotal by technician, I'm looking at my labor hours billed and my labor total and labor cost and how many invoices they worked on. That's one example. The other thing I can do here is I can subtotal by service category and subtotal by technician. So let me do this. So now I can actually look at by technician, by category. I could fill out my subtotals and see data by category for how much work they did in each category. So a lot of good service package level reports under the service package line sales summary. There's also vital signs under sales. Go back to all reports. The vital signs have a couple good ones in here, and especially the service category one. So vital signs by service category is a quick snapshot of those sales by those categories I just looked at, but it gives you kind of the shop level view. So this is one of the reports that I typically use on my KPI dashboards. So it shows me by service category, what my parts labor, what was my labor mix, part cost, my GP dollars, my parts GP. Just drag this over for a second. So this is a great report where I can look at what is my parts GP by service category. And it's the same thing I could do with the other report I just showed you where I could do parts GP by service category by technician or by service advisor. So a lot of ability to customize those reports. Invoice summary is one line per invoice. The service package reports are one line per service package. So it's just good to know what report to start with, and it helps you get to the report you're looking for. A couple other reports to highlight. Under employee, there are the technician summary is a really good one if you want to do what have my technicians produced in the last time period. So it gives a very high level technician name, how many invoices, how many jobs, how many labor hours did they clock, and it gives their efficiency number. So this is a very good technician summary. This is based on closed tickets. So one of the other questions we get a lot are, how do I pay technicians on completed jobs on open tickets? And we do have a dashboard we've created that shows that, but most of the reports in Protractor are going to be on closed invoices. So if you're really wanting reports to match to each other, you want to look at closed tickets. The time clock reports are also some very good reports, and these are based on if you have your technicians clocking in and out of jobs, I can look at their efficiency per job. So the time clock efficiency report gives me a line for every job, tells me if it's active, started, finished, how many hours clocked, how many hours billed, and then vehicle information. So I believe I have one of these saved. So labor detail report with efficiency. And this gives you an idea. I can do by technician. I can even, look at it by service category, service package, how many hours did they clock, bill, and their efficiency. All right. I realize I'm a little over 40 minutes in, 45 minutes in. I haven't covered. There's a lot more reports that we can go through. I'll pause here. Let me see if there's any questions that have come in. Yep, I can share that, the report I created in the user group. All right. There are, I'm just going real quickly, the CRM reports. If you're using the Protractor CRM, there's some great reports here to see about your email and postcard returns. Like how many did you send out, how many bounced, how many people came back in. Great data there. Customer follow-up is exactly what you expect it to be. I want to follow up with customers that have been in. Financial reports, the biggest one is like the cash receipts. That's how you run, if you do your bank, your cash drawer, deposits at the end of the day, the cash receipts is a report to show you that data historically. You can do inventory reports. Under lists, some people want emails. There's a one-click report to get your email list. Performance and loyalty. Under the performance loyalty, there's a couple good reports, especially for new customers. So people that want to look at their new customers, they can run this report. You set the date you're running it, which is, let's say today, and my new customer interval. So I want to see new customers for the last 90 days. So I execute that, and these are the new customers that have their first invoices with me in the last 90 days. And it'll show their first invoice, last invoice, how many invoices in total spending. So a really good new customer report there. And then taxes. We frequently get asked the question about taxes. Protractor has a number of tax reports. The other charge invoice summary will show you all of your other charges. So if you need to remit your tire taxes, that one real quick. If I want to remit my tire taxes for last month, I can run that for last month, and it'll show me all of my shop supplies, sales tax, tire tax, any of my charges. There's also a taxable sales summary. Now, this report is good. It shows you your taxable sales, but a lot of people want to also see their non-taxable sales. So one of the reports that we posted in the user group is this taxable and non-taxable sales summary. And this is a report you can run when you have that end of the month and you need to report your sales tax. This report gives you, these are how many parts I sold, this is how many were taxable, my labor taxable. If I scroll over, I have all my non-taxable totals, which I could sort if you want them right next to the other columns. So I can see what was the total taxable I sold, and then what was the tax collected. And these ones are based on this sales tax code. So my sales tax code is always S. So this is the total taxable for sales tax and the tax that I collected for sales tax. And this also shows you if I had a tax exempt customer, like right here, this customer is tax exempt. It'll show in this column. Now, if you notice this customer is tax exempt and not tax exempt, that's because in between those two invoices, I changed that customer's tax exempt status. So if you change a customer's tax exempt status, it doesn't go back in time. It only affects the new tickets going forward. All right. So I know I covered a lot of stuff. I want to show you guys the AMS Shop Performance Report that we're working on. But I'll pause one more time. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not sure if I can allow everyone to see. Our options. Okay, I think you can unmute yourself. There's a microphone icon at the top if you want to ask a question. So Phil asked the question, I do not have the tax summary that you just showed. So in your protractor, if you go to reports, make sure you go to all reports, and that's where the tax summary should be, the very last report. If for some reason you're not seeing like any tax reports, it may be a permission setting. Now, you won't see the taxable and non-taxable report because that's under my reports. That's something I made. Now, again, that report is in the user group. So in the user group files section, you should see a lot of the reports. Especially if you're doing reports, please also grab the file for how to import the reports. Let me bring that up real quick. Because this trips everyone up. Dashboards are very easy to import, but when you go to import reports, and this is the document I put in there, this is how to import a dashboard. Very easy. On the dashboard tab, you click import, scroll down, pick your dashboard, and make sure it's a dashboard. My naming convention, I try to say dashboard when it's a dashboard. But for reports, it's a little trickier. When you go into reports, you don't try to import it through the layout. You actually have to click the open button. Once you click open, you have to click this drop down to say report layout file, and then it'll show the reports. So I'll show you that in Protractor. If I wanted to import a report from the user group, first I would grab it from the user group, download it to my computer. I'd come in here, I'd say open, and I have a folder for Protractor reports. And I click this drop down and say report layout file, and now these are all my reports. So if I select one of these, it imports it into my Protractor. There's a tire sales report. Now the other important step, I'm going to bring it in, I'm going to run it, but I haven't saved it to my system yet. So if I want to save this, I have to go to layout, save layout, and this is now a tire sales report. Now I have that report saved on my system. So bring it in, then save that layout. And this shows me my tire sales. All right. So I mentioned some of the third-party reporting stuff. I wanted to show you guys the shop performance report we've been working on. Many of you may have used this report in RO Writer. We are recreating this for Protractor. It's probably going to go on sale shortly before Christmas. But basically the way this report works is you put in a date range. So here I have a week and you click refresh. This goes out using the Protractor API and pulls the data from Protractor into Excel. And it's mostly, I should say almost all this data you can get from the Protractor reports I just showed you. What we just tried to do is make it a little simpler for you, and so you don't have to do all that customization and lay it out in an attractive way. So we have your sales information over here, parts, labor, we break out tires, and in this case, tires is specifically your round rubber tires. We exclude valve stems, we include other things in the tire category, it's just tires. Tire labor, sublet, we break out your discounts. So we basically give you two ways of looking at it. This way, let me see if I can explain this right. This is the way Protractor normally reports it. So your discounts are already included in your part and labor sales numbers. This way is if when you put your part sales, like let's say into a coaching portal or spreadsheet, and they want your part sales before discounts, you could use this number, which is before discounts, and then discounts is a separate amount. So you subtract discounts from these numbers. So this is your part, labor, tire sales before any discounts. Discounts are called out separately, and we show your other charges, sales tax, total. The green, yellow, red, you can set parameters or goals. So if you're going to always run this for a week, you can set those things to be, if it's above $12,000, turn green. If it's below 12, between 10 and 12, turn yellow, below 10, turn red. So just some visual indicators you can use. In the middle column, it adds your cost numbers in, so you can see your actual margin dollars. The gray boxes are basically customer input. So we can't pull that information from Protractor, but you can enter it here if you know what your fixed cost is. Again, especially if you run this on a weekly basis, you can put in your service advisor technician cost separately if you want. And if you, for example, if you put in your technician cost from your payroll system, it zeroes out your labor cost up here because it assumes this is going to be your accurate total from payroll. So I'm not going to use the approximate total from Protractor. All right, key metrics over here. So we have car count, and we recently added this car count and then car count without $0 tickets. So some people that have a ticket where they defer all the work and close it at $0 don't want to count that. So we have your car counts both ways, with and without $0 tickets, and your average RO with and without $0 tickets. We can track how many courtesy checks you do. We can track how many tire units you sell. Custom parts department, it basically just means you can pick like cooling and say how many parts did I sell in the cooling department. Batteries is the one where we really did this, where some customers needed to report how many batteries they sold in a month. So you could pick the battery department, and this would show you how many. Labor hours turned. Credit labor hours is if you do any credit slips and credit back labor shows up. Your effective labor rate, your total labor hours per RO, and another new one is your total conversion percentage. So this is conversion. This is your batting average. How much how much work did you present to the customer versus how much you sold? So in this case, they sold 55% of the work they presented to the customer. And I'm going to go quick through the rest of this just because I can talk about this all day long. But we have a quick snapshot of your technicians, your service advisors, your other charges, and then we also have a sales and car count, like a daily trend. Now that's the main dashboard tab. I have a deferred work tab where I can see by service advisor the total volume. Of green is sales, and then yellow and blue are labor and parts deferred, and the purple is their batting average. So Chris sold 71%, Matt sold 43%. That's total dollar value. This one over here is average ticket, so the average estimate presented to the customer. So we can see that Chris and Matt, average estimates are $300 to $400. Eric, meanwhile, and thank you, Eric, for letting me show your data, shows an average $1,000 ticket. And then we've got more of the detail down here if you want to dig into more details of total estimated, total sales, total batting average. The next tab is parts. So this gives you a quick snapshot. This is your parts by service category. The blue is your part sales, the red is your margin, the green is your margin percentage. And we can do similar numbers by service advisor. And then down here we have all the details. So if you want to drill into any of your individual data points, I've got to refresh data to drill down through it. Let me refresh that real quick. It should only take about 15 seconds or so. And that's happened because I opened a saved file. Okay. So now I can go into parts, and let's say on my brakes, I sold 3 brake pads. I can double click on this, and I actually get the actual invoice and work order number. The brakes that I sold 2 brake pads on this one on this one, and drill down in the cost. So it's easy to drill down and get more data on all of your part sales. Same with labor. We give you a labor category. The car count is how many cars had that labor operation. And then again, a chart below where you can drill into by service category, what were my sales, labor hours, car count, effective labor rate, and I can drill down into the subcategories. Finally, the weekly trends. This will show you your trend over time for this shop, and I'm not going to refresh this one. This refresh takes a little longer, but you can basically set by week or by month, and you can see trends for, these are your overall sales trends by marketing source. This is your parts margin, and these filters are live, so if you click on like your advisor, you'll see each individual advisor's parts margin and sales, or you see the total. We have conversion trend by week and then labor hours. And again, you could click on individual technicians and it would show just their labor hours, or if you clear the filter, it shows all of them. That's a really quick summary of the shop performance report. I'm going to be doing a separate video on this. And like I said, we're finishing up some last minute details, but this will go on sale shortly from AMS. All right. I'm at the top of the hour. Does anybody else have any questions on any of the reporting stuff? And I apologize again for the delay getting started. I normally try to get in earlier and make sure people know how to use the chat box and all that stuff. This will be recorded. We'll post the recording link in the user group. And I don't know if anyone's can unmute and try to ask a question or put it in the chat room. I'll kill time for another 30 seconds to see if anybody else has any questions. And when I close the meeting, you'll get prompted to take a survey. Please take it. It's like 3 questions, just trying to figure out if this was useful or not. I'm very open to feedback, that I go too fast, too slow, etc. I have a tendency to get really excited about the reporting. I love figuring out how to customize reports. So if there's some data point you need and you can't get, let me know. I'd be happy to help out with that.
Good job, Scott.
Good job. Thanks, Mike. All right.
Muted.
I think we're done. And as always, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to always post them in the user group. The user group is the easiest way for me to tell you about these webinars. So that's where I'll be posting most of the updates, the recordings, and letting you know when the next one is. Also, feel free to let me know what you think a good topic would be for the next webinar. Thank you very much. I hope everyone is happy with their protractor. If there's anything else AMS can do for you, please let me know. Have a nice day. Bye.